It happens on a Thursday afternoon. You're crossing the street, headphones in, not paying attention. The truck hits you at 40 miles per hour. You feel everything, the impact, the flight, the landing. Your body hits the pavement so hard it cracks the asphalt. 3 ribs shatter. Your left arm bends the wrong way. Your skull fractures on the curb. You hear screaming. Someone is calling 911. A woman covers her mouth. A man kneels beside you and says, "Don't move, don't move." But the thing is, you feel fine. Not fine like shock fine. Fine like the pain is leaving. You feel your ribs moving back into place. You feel the bone in your arm straightening with a sound like cracking knuckles. The fracture in your skull seals itself with a warm hum, like a phone vibrating inside your head. You sit up. The man kneeling beside you falls backward. The woman screams again, but differently this time. You look at your hands. No blood, no bruises. Your shirt is torn, but the skin underneath is perfect. The paramedics arrive 4 minutes later. They find you standing, apologizing, saying it looked worse than it was. But you saw the truck. You felt the impact. You died on that street for about 11 seconds. And then you didn't. You spend the next week testing it, quietly, carefully, in the privacy of your apartment. You start small, a kitchen knife across your palm. The cut opens, bleeds for about 2 seconds, and then closes like a zipper. No escar. You try deeper. Same result. You hold your hand over the stove burner. The skin blisters, turns black, and then regenerates in under 10 seconds. Fresh pink skin like a baby's. You stop eating for 5 days. Nothing happens. No hunger, no weakness. Your body just sustains itself. You stay awake for 72 hours. No fatigue. Your mind stays razor sharp at hour 70 as it was at hour 1. You go to the doctor for a full physical. Every metric is perfect: blood pressure, cholesterol, organ function. The doctor says you're the healthiest 32-year-old he's ever examined. You don't tell him you haven't eaten in 5 days. You stand in your bathroom mirror and you look exactly the same as you did yesterday, as you did last week, as you did last year. And you realize, slowly, with a mixture of terror and exhilaration, that you might look exactly like this forever. The first year is incredible. You quit your job because, why wouldn't you? You have infinite time. You learn to play piano in 3 months. Not casually, concert level. When you have all day, every day, and your brain never tires, learning becomes almost unfair. You read 400 books. You learn Mandarin, then Arabic, then Portuguese. You run a marathon without training and finish in the top 20. You travel. You climb mountains without gear because falling doesn't matter. You swim in the open ocean for hours. You walk through the worst neighborhoods at 3 a.m. because nothing can hurt you. The world becomes a playground when you remove the concept of risk. Your friends notice the change. You're more confident, more relaxed, more present. What happened to you? They ask. You're like a different person. You smile and say you've been working on yourself. You don't say you've been jumping off your roof at night to watch the bones heal. You don't say that you held your breath underwater for 45 minutes last Tuesday just to see what would happen. Nothing happened. You just waited, and then you walked out of the pool. The first year feels like a cheat code, like the universe handed you the answer key and said, go. Year 3. Your grandmother dies. She's 91. It wasn't a surprise. She'd been sick for months. You sit in the front row at the funeral, and you feel something you haven't felt since the truck. Genuine pain. Not physical. That's gone forever. Emotional. The kind that doesn't heal in 10 seconds. You watch them lower the casket into the ground, and you think, I will never be in one of those. Everyone in this room will eventually lie in a box like that. Everyone except me. Your mother, standing beside you, crying, she will die. Your brother, your friends, the priest reading the eulogy, all of them are on a clock. And you're not. For the first time, the immortality doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like a glass wall. You're standing on one side, and every person you've ever loved is standing on the other. And the wall is invisible, and they can't see it, but you can feel it every time you touch it. You hug your mother after the service. She feels so fragile, so temporary. You hold her a little too long, and she laughs and says, I'm fine, sweetheart. But what you're really thinking is, I'm going to remember this hug for 1,000 years, and you will have forgotten it by next Tuesday. Year 50. You still look 32. Your mother died 11 years ago. Your brother died of a heart attack at 67. Your best friend from college, the one who always made you laugh, who called you every Sunday, he died in his sleep at 74. You went to his funeral. You went to all their funerals. Every single one. You've changed your identity 3 times now. New name, new city, new backstory. You can't stay in one place too long because people notice. The neighbors start asking why you haven't aged. The co-workers start making jokes. What's your skincare routine? And the jokes get less funny each year. So you leave. You pack a bag and become someone else. You're on your 4th career. You've been a teacher, a carpenter, an EMT, and now you're a librarian in a small town in Oregon. You chose the library because it's quiet and nobody asks questions. The books don't age either. You find comfort in that. You've had 3 serious relationships since the change. Each one ended the same way. You watched them get older while you stayed the same. The first one, Maria, thought it was charming at first. My boyfriend has great genes, she'd tell her friends. But by year 12, when she was 48 and you still looked 32, the charm had rotted into something else. She started looking at you with a mixture of jealousy and fear. She left on a Tuesday. You let her go because you knew she was right to leave. The second relationship lasted 6 years. The third, 4. Each one shorter because you're getting better at predicting the expiration date. Year 200. The world looks nothing like the one you were born into. The cities are different. The language has shifted, not drastically, but enough that you sound slightly old-fashioned when you speak. Slang you used to know is now in history textbooks. Music you grew up with is called classical. The country you were born in has different borders. You've lived through 3 wars. Not as a soldier. You learned early that immortality doesn't protect you from imprisonment. You can't die, but you can be locked in a box forever, and that thought terrifies you more than anything. So you avoid conflict. You move. You stay invisible. You've mastered 14 languages. You've read every major work of literature written in the last 2 centuries, plus most of what came before. You can play 11 instruments. You've earned degrees in physics, philosophy, medicine, and art history, each under a different name, at a different university, in a different decade. And here's the thing nobody tells you about knowing everything. It's boring. When you've read every book, heard every argument, learned every skill, what's left? Novelty dies, surprise dies. You walk into a concert hall and you already know every note before it's played. You meet a new person and within 10 minutes you've categorized them into one of about 40 personality types you've identified over 2 centuries. People are beautiful, but they're also predictable. And predictability over enough time is a kind of death. Year 500. You've stopped counting relationships. The number is somewhere around 40. You've loved deeply, sincerely, every time. And every time, you've watched them age and die. The first few were devastating. By the 15th, you developed a system. Love fully, grieve completely, and then pack a bag. By the 30th, the grieving period shortened. Not because you cared less, but because the part of your brain that processes loss has been overworked so many times it's become efficient. Like a muscle that's been torn and rebuilt so often it doesn't even swell anymore. You've started keeping journals. Not for anyone else. No one will ever read them. For yourself. Because you've discovered something terrifying. You forget. Not everything and not quickly. But the human brain, even an immortal one, has limits. Faces blur. Voices fade. You can remember that Maria existed and that you loved her, but you can't remember the sound of her laugh. It's been 450 years. The laugh is gone. You have a room in your apartment filled with journals. 2,312 volumes. Each one is a decade. You read the early ones sometimes, the ones from your first century, and you barely recognized the person who wrote them. He was so excited, so naive. He thought immortality was a gift. He hadn't buried anyone yet. The hardest part isn't watching people die. You made peace with that. The hardest part is forgetting them afterward. Because when you forget someone, they die twice. Once in a world, and once in you. And the second death is the one that's your fault. Year 800. Humanity has changed in ways you couldn't have predicted. The technology is unrecognizable. The social structures are different. The religions have shifted, merged, split, disappeared, and been replaced by new ones. You've watched entire civilizations rise and collapse. You've seen countries that once seemed permanent vanish from the map like they were written in pencil. You've walked through the ruins of cities you once lived in. You stood on a hill overlooking what used to be New York, or what people now call something else entirely. And you remembered buying coffee on the corner of 5th and 42nd. The coffee shop is gone. The street is gone. The entire concept of New York is historical trivia. But you were there. You remember the taste of that coffee. And no one else in the world does. You're the only continuous memory on Earth. Every other human recycles. They're born, they accumulate experiences, they die, and the memories die with them. But you persist. You're the hard drive that never gets wiped. And that makes you the loneliest thing in the history of the species. You try to tell people over the centuries. It never goes well. In the early years, they didn't believe you. In the middle years, they wanted to study you. In the later years, they worshiped you. None of those responses gave you what you actually needed, which was simple, someone who understood. And no one can understand because no one has ever lived long enough to. Year 1000. You sit in a room with your journals and you realize you can't remember your mother's face. You know she existed. You know she was kind. You know she hugged you at your grandmother's funeral and you held on too long. But the face, the actual arrangement of features, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, the specific shade of her hair, it's gone. Dissolved by time, like everything else. You spend 3 days reading your earliest journals, trying to reconstruct her. You find a passage where you described her hands, small, warm, always moving. But that's not a face. That's a fragment. And fragments are all you have now. You realize that memory isn't a photograph. It's a painting that gets repainted every time you look at it. And after 1,000 repaintings, it doesn't look like the original anymore. It looks like what you think the original looked like. And after enough time, even that dissolves into feeling. You don't remember your mother. You remember the feeling of your mother. And someday, even that will go. Year 1200. You try to end it. Not because you're sad. You've moved past sad. Sadness requires hope. And hope requires a belief that things can change. You're not sad. You're tired. A weariness so deep it lives in your atoms. You've been awake for over 1 million hours. You've seen the sun rise 438,000 times. Each one is beautiful. Each one is exactly the same. You try everything. You won't describe the methods because they don't matter. None of them work. Your body regenerates from every injury, every poison, every extreme. You can't drown, your lungs rebuild. You can't burn, your cells regrow. You jump from the tallest structure on Earth and you land, and it hurts, and then it doesn't, and then you stand up and walk home. Again, the cruelest part of immortality isn't living forever. It's being unable to choose not to. Every other human who has ever lived had an exit. Not one they would choose, but one that existed. A boundary. A wall at the end of the corridor that said, this is where it stops. You don't have that wall. Your corridor goes on forever. And a corridor with no end isn't a path. It's a prison. You sit on the ground after the last attempt and you laugh. Not because it's funny, because what else can you do? You're stuck. Permanently, irrevocably, cosmically stuck. And you realize that you need to find a reason to keep going. Not because you'll die if you don't, but because existing without a reason is worse than any death you've imagined. Year 1500. You find a monastery, or what the people of this era call a sanctuary. A place in the mountains where a small group practices something ancient. Not religion exactly. More like patience. They sit. They breathe. They exist without needing a reason to. You walk in and you tell them the truth. All of it. The truck, the healing, the centuries, the forgetting, the attempts, the laughing on the ground. The head of the sanctuary, an old woman with calm eyes, listens to the entire story. It takes 6 hours. She doesn't interrupt once. When you finish, she says one thing. You've been alive for 1,500 years. Have you ever tried being present for a single one of them? The question hits you like the truck did, because she's right. You've been alive for 15 centuries, but you've spent most of that time either remembering the past or dreading the future. You've been running from grief, from boredom, from the weight of accumulation. You've never stopped and stood in one moment and said, this is enough. She teaches you. It takes decades, not because the skill is hard, but because your habits are 15 centuries deep. But slowly, painfully, you learn to exist in a single moment. To watch a sunset without comparing it to the 400,000 that came before. To meet a person without calculating when they'll die. To drink a cup of tea and taste only the tea, not the memory of every cup you've had since the 12th century. Year 2000. You become the Archivist. It's not a title anyone gives you. It's a role you create for yourself. You're the only being on Earth who remembers what humanity was like 2 millennia ago. Not from books or records, from lived experience. You remember the smell of gasoline, the sound of a dial-up modem, the feeling of paper money between your fingers. Things that are as alien to the current world as stone tools were to yours. You start writing again. Not journals this time, histories. Personal, intimate histories of what it felt like to live in each era. Not the dates and battles that textbooks record, but the texture. The way people talk to each other in the 21st century. The specific loneliness of scrolling through a phone at 2 a.m. The sound of a car engine, a sound that hasn't existed for 600 years. People come to you, not to worship. You've made sure that phase is over. They come to listen. Students, scientists, artists, they sit in your room and you tell them about a world they can't imagine. And for the first time in a very long time, your remembering isn't a burden. It's a bridge. Every face you forgot, every lover you lost, every friend you buried, they live on faintly in the stories you tell. They're not gone. They're just downstream, and you're the river that still carries them. Year 2300. A child asks you a question that changes everything. She's 7. She's been brought to you by her class. A field trip to see the Archivist. The other children are bored. They fidget, they whisper, they don't understand why this man in the chair is important. But this one girl walks up to you and says, "Does it hurt? Being old." You smile. "I'm not old. I'm just long." She thinks about this. Then, do you get lonely? Sometimes. Don't you have friends? I've had many friends. Thousands. Where are they? You pause. You've answered this question from adults 100 different ways. Philosophical, poetic, deflecting. But she's 7. So you tell the truth. They're gone. All of them. She looks at you with the kind of empathy that only children have, raw, unprocessed, without the adult instinct to look away. And she says, "I'll be your friend. You know she'll live maybe 90 years, maybe 100, a blink, a single breath in your timeline. But she's standing there, offering you her friendship with absolute sincerity, knowing at some level that it's temporary. And you realize every friendship is temporary. Yours just has a wider lens. The mortality doesn't make the offer less valuable. It makes it more valuable because she's giving you something she has a limited supply of. And that's the most generous thing any being can do. Okay, you say, deal. Year 3000. You plant a garden. It's not your first. You've planted hundreds over the centuries. But this one is different because you plant it knowing exactly what it means. Every seed is a bet on the future, an act of faith that tomorrow matters, that next spring matters, that the thing you plant today will become something beautiful for someone who isn't you. Gardening is the opposite of immortality. It's investing in time you don't need to invest in, caring about outcomes you don't need to care about, building something that will grow, bloom, decay, and die while you persist. You plant a cherry tree. It will take 8 years to bear fruit. You've lived through millions of days, but these 8 years matter because you've chosen them. Not because you have to wait, but because the waiting is the point. The anticipation, the care, the daily act of showing up with water and attention for something that can't thank you. The tree blooms in year 8. The blossoms are white and pink, and they last 11 days. You sit under them on the 11th day, petals falling around you, and you feel something you thought immortality had taken from you. Gratitude, not for the tree, for the fact that you're still capable of caring about something that ends. Because that's the secret, isn't it? The thing that took you 3,000 years to learn? Love isn't meaningful despite being temporary. It's meaningful because it's temporary. And the fact that you, an immortal being with nothing to lose, can still choose to care about 11 days of cherry blossoms. That's not weakness. That's the most human thing you've ever done. Year 5000. You write a letter, not to anyone alive, to everyone who will ever live. You seal it in a material that will last, and you leave it in a place where it will be found. The letter says this: I have lived for 5,000 years. I have seen everything your species is capable of, the cruelty, the genius, the pettiness, the breathtaking kindness. I have watched you build and destroy and rebuild. I have loved thousands of you and buried everyone. Here is what I know. You're not here for long. None of you. The longest human life is a flash. A single frame in a film that runs forever. And I know this because I am the film. I am the one who keeps playing after your frame ends. And I can tell you from experience, from 5,000 years of experience, that your frame matters. Not because it lasts, because it doesn't. The most beautiful things I have ever witnessed lasted moments. A child laughing, a stranger helping another stranger in the rain, 2 old people holding hands on a bench, not talking, just being together before one of them leaves forever. These moments are so small they barely register. And they're the only things I still carry after 5 millennia. You will die. I'm sorry. I know that scares you. But your death is not your enemy. It's your editor. It's the thing that forces you to choose what matters. I don't have an editor. I have to carry everything. And I promise you, a life with an ending is better than a story that never stops. Year 10,000. You stand on a hill. The sun is rising. It's the 3,652,500th sunrise you've witnessed. You know this because you counted for a while until counting became absurd. The sun doesn't know you're immortal. It doesn't care. It rises because that's what it does. And you stand here because that's what you do.